Much like last year, it's time to once again roll out the clickbaitiest video title of them all and take a look at the competition. Video gamer Stephen W. Burns has called PES 2016 the greatest football game ever made, and whilst that honour surely goes to Chris Kamara's Street Soccer, PES 2016 is a massive improvement over last year, which is already good, and that's something that FIFA players should be incredibly pleased about. So this is once more PES as seen through the eyes of a self-identified FIFA player. As someone that's not a day in day out PES enthusiast, part of the reason PES feels so good is familiarity. FIFA feels familiar to FIFA players, obviously, which is why PES feels so fresh. Let's face it, with 2015 last year and now 2016, there's been a shift in the way the game's press treat PES. It's no longer an also-ran, and is now once more the football game of choice for some, and that shift isn't unwarranted. PES 2016 plays very, very nicely. I'm really impressed by what Konami have achieved. PES has a wonderful, fluid feeling to it. From the way players actually move the ball around the pitch, through their off-the-ball movement themselves, the players handle incredibly well and the tempo of matches feels just right. Early on, you'll be inclined to agree that it's up there with the very best football games. Later, niggles start to show themselves, but that's to be expected. Keepers, for example, whilst having recently been patched, are just as prone to a wobble as FIFA's. Players sometimes feel like they overrun a bit when sprinting, although in fairness, you won't be leaning on the sprint button anyway, and defensively, I feel quite vulnerable in the air, particularly from crosses, but PES has a way of making you feel like a footballing genius, which is saying something for me, and it does a great job of making it interesting to play all over the pitch and try different things. I mentioned last year that PES didn't suffer from being overcomplicated in the way that FIFA feels at times, which is still true and is especially noticeable in the way players animate and the way they interact with each other. It feels like there's less to go wrong with PES's systems, without really sacrificing anything in the way of manoeuvrability or physicality between players. Another area PES shines in is tactics. The preset tactics and fluid formation systems are rock solid and work incredibly well. The ability to have your formation naturally shift based on changes in possession is so simple and so brilliant. It absolutely melts my mind that EA haven't stolen it yet. Best of all, you can see the AI use them against you. Imagine that, and in the right context as well. So here, just after Barcelona took a late 2-1 lead against me in the Champions League, they visibly switched to a defensive mentality. It's genius. One other thing I'd like to see brought over into FIFA is the manual modifier. It's been discussed before and I was against it, initially of the thinking that full manual controls are the way to go. But the more I use this in PES, the more I'd like to see FIFA borrow this idea, particularly since we've seen something kind of similar in FIFA Trainer, although it's not a modifier, but it shows you where you're passing. Being able to temporarily bypass the pass assistance is really, really handy, and it's really, really simple. Anyway, PES is very, very enjoyable on the pitch, and is looking really good. On the PS4, the game looks fantastic close up. Less noticeable when pulled out in gameplay views, but it looks great close up. And again, it's a grass is always greener thing, but little touches like rain on the camera and stuff like that, really, really neat. Some of the player faces are incredible, even when held up against FIFA's models where the player faces have actually been scanned. Bonus, Szczesny no longer looks like a thumb. I'd like to think that was my influence. Licensing is usually sat towards the top of any reasons FIFA is better than PES list, and I know, it's all about gameplay anyway. Well, that's only partly true. As someone that's had PES 2015 on Xbox One, I will concede that it did hurt my game experience a bit to have a fully licensed set of teams involved. So this year I went for PES 2016 on PS4 to allow some experimenting with the game's editing tools. The thing is, it's piss easy. You go to a website, download the kits, slap them on a USB stick and copy them into the game. To whip through the kits and team names, I reckon that's going to take you about an hour, and if you also want to edit all the stadium names and manager photos and stuff like that, maybe 3. It may sound like a long time, and don't get me wrong, it's really, really boring, but it will take you from this to this. Trust me, it's worth it. That is a massive difference. It also shows how EA's stranglehold on licensing can have negative effects, as there's absolutely no way that EA could offer anything that approaches the level of customization offered here, meaning that any kit or team errors become a huge frustration. In PES, you can just fix them yourself, or more than likely, just go and download the fruits of someone else's hard work. Be sure to say thank you though. I'll leave a link below to the ones I used, they're spot on. Konami have retained the Champions League license and once more put it to good use. This is one of the areas PES is most enjoyable for me, experimenting with different teams through the license tournaments, but the bottom line is licensing can easily be fixed unless you're on Xbox. Online things aren't as positive. Even early on I suffered with disconnects which can frustratingly result in the match being wiped altogether, but there are some nice touches like a simple system for avoiding kit clashes and the ability to add people to a block list ensuring you won't face them again. I also found that some of the fluidity of the game is lost online, be that because of lag or something else. It just doesn't feel as smooth as offline play at all. Like, it's not even close to it. I don't even mean that it's obviously jittery or laggy or anything like that. It's because it's not. It just feels different. It feels just not as smooth. And offline play for me is where it's at with PES, which is a shame because I was really looking forward to playing online. I guess that leads us to my club, PES's sort of answer to Ultimate Team, which has seen some good improvements since its first outing in PES 2015. I like the fact that you can pick a squad to play for you online against other teams when you're not around, and the rewards come thick and fast, certainly early on, but it's still not got that something that Ultimate Team has. I'm sure it will continue to improve year on year, but you have to really dig around to get the best of it, which is good in some ways, I guess, as you have to work hard to build a strong squad, but there's some of the pick up and play that FUT has that's lost in the process. The tutorials are good and a must view for newcomers, but you've got to balance your players against the manager, with each having links in different areas, plus keep an eye on your overall team costs to avoid being punished for having a crap manager. It's just different, and I think for people with a ton of Ultimate Team experience, they may be stretched to push FUT out of their mind when trying to get into my club. In fact, the worst thing you can do is try and compare the systems in either, because whilst in principle they're similar, you'll just confuse yourself. So I guess that's my fault. Not the fault of my club, but it's there, and it does reward you for investing time in understanding it, as it should. I also like that you can redeem GP against agents to sign players. GP is earned throughout all modes and through gameplay, so whilst playing offline or Master League, you're earning currency to spend in my club. It's basically like if EA gave you more EA Sports Football Club credits and then allowed you to spend them on packs. We can dream. You've got the equivalent of manager tasks and tournaments, but there's no market, so your squad growth can feel quite slow at times. And you can't specifically target players unless they show up on the loan list. This works for and against the mode for me. The downside is you can't pick from the full database to build your squad, but the upside is that the feeling of stopping the wheel on a black ball and finding a properly prestige player is increased significantly. Unless you actually want them though, they hold little value, and you can merely release them for around about a tenth of their cost to get hold of, depending on which agent you use. So it's a different way of building squads really, and not something that's going to be for everyone. One nice touch is player growth, obviously something that's not present in Ultimate Team. So you're rewarded again for match time, and there's a system for converting unwanted players into trainers and using them to boost players you are going to keep, which can be quite generous depending on the quality of the player converting. What my club misses though is that real world interaction. One of the beautiful things of Ultimate Team is seeing a player perform in the real world and then picking them up in Ultimate Team to try them out. You can't do that in my club as there's no market, so one of the crucial things that gives longevity to a mode like this is completely lost. So, online PES is pretty poor, but what about Master League? Immediately noticeable is a massively improved interface. It's clear that some of this is borrowed from FIFA, which is fine because they've borrowed the right things. The UI is a massive step up from last year. Everything's laid out much more sensibly. There are new stories too. However, light is something else to point your eyes at, but the most enjoyable thing about Master League for me is the crossover onto the pitch. Things like lower quality teams noticeably sitting deep against you all make Master League feel alive. I'll caveat all this by saying I played very little Master League last year and I'm really early on this year, but the improvements are already there to see. I can't really comment on extended player growth over periods of years and stuff like that, but Master League creates this brilliant mindset where you never want to reload and change a result if it doesn't go your way, which you could, but you just don't want to. You suck it up and move on to the next match, following your team through their darker moments. Transfers, sold Arteta for 9 million, had to pay 30 for Tevez, make of that what you will. A nice touch when purchasing players is this screen charting their expected growth, which also fills out over time, so it shows that matched against their actual growth. I also really like these little staff report sheets that pop up with happenings around the club. There's a nice simple system for editing base positions, and showing your next opponent as you set up your game plan is a really nice touch too. When editing your manager, part of you thinks, why am I sat here customising this guy's eyelids? But the reason for doing that is the cutscenes. You will actually see him. Yay. Plus, there's the player reward stuff too. I think career mode players have welcomed these bits, so there's some nice touches there. But here's the killer with Master League. It's currently using PES 2015 squad data, and a squad update won't be available until the 29th of October. You may have noticed in these clips, some of the data's pretty out of touch. So if you want to get the best of it before then, you'll need to edit your squads yourself. How much of that will affect what happens when the patch does release, I've no idea. I've decided that I'd already seen enough to say, yeah, I really like it, and I'll just wait and I'll start again after the full update. Anyway, PES is once again really good, and I'm glad that Konami continue to push EA, but I do hope they start to up their game off the pitch a bit, because whilst they are now a serious contender in terms of playing football, there's still some work to do online. I don't think EA have anything to worry about in that area just yet. The key thing is choice though for football gamers, and more pressure on EA to perform. Good times.
It's Thiago!